Hello, everyone. It is Friday. I'm sure you all already know that. And we just have 30 minutes before the floor to catch up on that non-homestead technical bill a little bit more. Abby did some more drafting based on what we said last time, and we have a new draft up on our website. And so hoping we can go a little bit further into that. Abby, what I'm hoping we can do is before we jump into your edits, to go through the paragraphs that we actually haven't gone through yet. And pets are welcome in all Ways and Means meetings, as are children, if ever necessary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel. There may be a cat attacking the window, so I'll try not to be too distracted by that. Children are hopefully not eating candy, so they're safely elsewhere. Okay, under my name, I'm sorry, it has been an interesting morning with the 2-hour delay. I'm just checking to make sure there should be at least one document under my name.
There is, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Again, if you did I know that the committee liked seeing the classifications in sort of flow chart form. There is that option to refer back to, although things have changed slightly since my initial walkthrough of the language. So this is draft 1.6. And if you want to start with what we hadn't covered yet, I haven't made any changes to those sections. So we can jump ahead to page 3, line 14, because we didn't get to utility. And that was the last definition that we hadn't covered. We did look at all of the others. So, and also just to point out, the yellow highlighting that you'll see in the language is where I have made changes. I did take out some language, so there isn't highlighting there. So the highlighting is just what's new language. So starting on line 14, utility means property that's regulated under Title 30 by either the Department of Public Service or the Public Utility Commission. That's very broad. That captures any sort of utility property.
Can you tell us more about just sort of can we have some examples?
Sure. So that could be electric utilities. It could be the wind powered or solar generating facilities. It's any type of utility.
Okay. Dams.
And if you'd like more information on utilities, Ellen Tchaikovsky is our attorney that works in that area, so she'd be able to give you more detail. I did work with her on this definition. She confirmed that technically saying any utility that is regulated by either of those entities captures all of the utilities in Vermont.
Great. And go ahead.
So the chair just mentioned dams. That would be dams that are producing energy, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the dams question. Yeah. That is my understanding, but I will go back. I will double check that with Ellen. It's a good question. I don't know.
Your point is there might be some dams which exist but are not currently producing power, right, and so wouldn't be regulated by DPS or BPC.
No jurisdiction from FERC or anybody.
And I know that we've done, even in my time on Ways and Means, a lot of sort of nibbling around the fact that utilities are very hard to value sort of by a municipality. And so we have all kinds of provisions so that the state can manage that process. And apparently Abby, did you tell me this or did Jill from PBR? There's a global dam valuation expert that comes into Vermont sort of regularly to assist, but was that you that told me that?
I was probably referring to that there's sort of a yearly appropriation that goes to fund an expert that helps in litigation on dams. But there are very specific valuation provisions that apply to certain utilities.
Thanks.
But also the language that you're looking at in the reappraisal bill that was added last session to look at complex properties, including utilities. So they also sort of fall into that new treatment for appraisals and litigation assistance.
Thanks.
Great. So that is the last definition that would be newly added. The next section relates to what is shown on the property tax bill. And this is more of a conforming change. So that's on page 4. You'll see the underlined language starting on line 4. So this is where the commissioner of taxes determines the municipal property tax rate. And then the legislative body of each town then bills property taxpayers, and they have to show the classification of property, so either homestead or non-homestead. And it has this specific language that says without regard to any other tax classification of the property. So there's sort of this exception to that saying, you know, this isn't changing classifications. You still have homestead or non-homestead, but within homestead, you have these new categories. So that would have to be shown on the property tax bill. That's what lines 4 through 6 do on page 4. And again, further down the page, lines 16 and 17 require that when a taxpayer is being billed, that the tax bill clearly indicates the category of the non-homestead property. And then section 3 on page 5 makes the act take effect at the start of this upcoming property tax year, July 1st, 2023. But because the grand lists will have already been lodged in April, it doesn't apply to grand lists until they're lodged next April 1st in 2024. So that could be changed if you wanted to push it out further, or I think realistically it would be, I'm sure you could hear from the towns about this, but there wouldn't be any way for towns to start billing and even to have the boots on the ground to go look at these properties and categorize them now in the next month. So I think you do still have leeway there if you wanted to have this bill take effect later.
Yeah.
Just, Abby, I noticed that back on, it would be the previous page, line 17, lowercase b, if you will, is the division within which all the rest follows. And it is specifically referencing the education tax shall be calculated that way. My thought when we went down this road was that creating the classifications would not be exclusive to the education side. And I just wonder, it's all couched in that frame rather than saying more broadly property taxes, whether it's the municipal side or the education side. I just want to be sure that we are leaving the door open to classifying on both calculations. That's all I'm worried about, the way it's organized.
Abby, what would be the implications of expanding it?
Not sure how that would function. So the classifications only exist in the education property tax. That split doesn't, like, it's all one rate at the municipal level. So it doesn't, I would have to think through that more, how you would insert that into a municipal tax structure.
One place I could see it being useful if it wasn't possible to insert it into a municipal tax structure is that presentation from Joe Minicozy. Really, brain is working this morning. That was sort of, you would need this mechanism in order to do that at the municipal level. And I have heard there are a few municipalities that are interested in that.
At the time, I remarked how often taxes are seen and should be seen as development tools, in which case, if on the muni side, it's all one flavor called non-homestead, you don't have that kind of ethic and opportunity.
So I know that one thing we had talked about was whether a property is classified entirely as one thing, and whether there's was primacy the word that we were using. Is that something you thought a little bit more about, Abby, or?
Can we finish this
question,
this section before because that's a great question. I just want to. Yes. Is everyone So other than that question around municipal taxes, is everyone okay with this language? Okay. And does the utility language work for folks? Okay. Back to you, sorry.
I think that was
Just had
it.
some check, okay.
That
Abby.
seems really important.
Back to you for that question.
Great. So this language based on the, sorry, I'm just writing that question down. So based on the committee's discussion, there are no explicit changes around mixed use. So the way that a property that was under both, so I think, I'm not sure which example would be the most useful, but the homestead that has a lot of land along with it. Currently, the way this is drafted, the entire property would still be fully homestead. Or if you had the mixed use in the example of a condo development with a bunch of, say, common land, that would all go into however the condo is classified. If you want to separate out dwellings and perhaps a 2-acre, just following what is already existing in other areas of property tax law, if you wanted to do 2 acres and the dwelling, that language would need to be added in. So this draft does not carve out dwellings and the land around it. That said, I did make a few changes to open land and structures, rental housing, and then the seasonal and non-seasonal secondary dwellings. But those were more, again, just trying to make sure that each category is as mutually exclusive as possible. So I can pause there if you wanted to discuss more of ways to go about treating mixed use. Otherwise, I can walk through the changes so far.
I think we'll pause for a minute.
Yeah, so I guess I see is there a carve out for 2 acres or something as one issue, and another issue is if I have a parcel that has 20% commercial, 10% industrial, and 30, whatever balance is, 60% rental, is there one category that is primary and then therefore the whole parcel is categorized as that, or am I allocating a certain portion of my property to different categorizations and then my bill would have that reflected on it?
I think that allocating different percentages makes sense up to a point, and then there's some point where it becomes absurd. And so I guess I'm wondering if we want to sort of name that point where it becomes absurd, like more than 3 or anything less than 10% or something like that. And then we sort of stop there.
Yeah.
And then I think there should be some clarity about how you determine
What the percentages are, or determine what.
what do you do if it's less than 10% or something like that? Yeah,
You just ignore it, I think. Because that's what we do now, right, Abby? If, even with
Partly.
homestead and non-homestead, if it's sort of less than a percentage, you ignore it.
So with the business use of a homestead dwelling, you have a 25% sort of safe harbor. It's up to 25%. It's all just still homestead. If it's over 25%, it will be carved out. The amount that's used for business uses, that is carved out and made into a non-homestead. So you could follow something along those lines.
If we use that mechanism, we'd never have more than 4.
True.
Thanks for the math. Math validation.
I mean, it seems like there should be a whole
That works.
section that describes how
Yeah.
you classify the thing.
Yes, I think this current draft still doesn't, I didn't quite have enough clarity from the committee to be able to, insert anything, but I think it would make a lot of sense to have an additional subdivision saying, in the case of mixed use, either here are the categories that would have supremacy, or here's how you would determine a split based on square footage or another. I'm not sure what other metric you could use that would be fairly sort of a bright line rule. That is really getting, as all of these categories do, you're really getting deep into the uses of property, which would definitely require interaction with the property owner and some sort of, not necessarily certification, but would, it adds an extra burden onto determining how a property is classified or categorized.
I think there's also a time component too, right? If I manufacture something industrial for 10 minutes once a year, all of a sudden is that?
That's how you figure it, like how you figure out the percentage, basically. Like what counts as 25%, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think the square footage was making
Yes,
sense, but also like
Mhm.
some minimum threshold for not just square footage, but also
Time.
And that is a great point because in the rental, the way that rental properties knock portions or all of a homestead out of homestead, it's the entire, at any point that a homestead is used as a rental, that portion is excluded and is treated as non-homestead. There are different ways that you could get at the time factor, especially for seasonal properties. I'm thinking like a commercial use, but that's very seasonal. So if it were, you could look at it at the end of the year, if there was any use throughout the year, or at the end of the year at a specific point in time, or you could look at, you could say in any, say 3-month period, if there was this much use of the property, you know, it can get quite complex quickly, but you can try and determine a little more equitably how and when those uses are occurring. So maybe it's also a certain amount of days per year, per month. I think the discussion had been about the short-term rental. There's that 14-day, anything over that, and it's taxable. But then when you get up to 30 days, then it's a permanent residence. So it's occupancy. So there are different ways to determine time, as well as square footage, if you wanted to go that route.
Jim, I think you.
Well, let's comment on a lot of this stuff, which may be applicable here and there. The more categories or the more we try to fine tune things, we may end up going in the wrong direction. So there'll be a greater propensity to try to split hairs out there. So just my 10 cents, Abby, is if we can keep it straightforward without too much trend towards reinterpretation by someone, the better off we'll be.
Representative Bodie.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how this would impact land use planning and land use. What kinds of things might people do once they see what the rules are, see what the tax rates are? How will they decide to use land to take advantage of how we set the system up? So, and I don't, I could try to think of hypotheticals to think of how that might happen, but it's just something I'm thinking.
We are not changing tax rates here, and we're not touching current use
I
here.
understand that.
Okay. And I know you do. I just want to say it over and over and over again that we're not changing tax rates here. Like this is a technical exercise in order to make things make a little more sense. But yes, I hear that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That last comment helped me.
Oh, good.
Because I have been thinking this whole time that the reason we're doing this is so we can assign different tax rates to each parcel, each by definition. And I couldn't support that. But if all we're doing is identifying the uses of different parcels, I think that's probably very practical. I am a little worried about the extra time it'll take the town clerk or whoever it is that keeps the grand list. I think it's going to be somewhat time consuming, at least initially.
My understanding is that we already have categories on the grand list and they are not being used consistently from town to town. And so on some level, this is sort of part of the reappraisal standardization process that we can maybe have those categories make sense. And that like the time is already being put in, it's just not being put in as efficiently as it could be. But Jim.
And also commensurate with taking what maybe be smaller steps, measurable steps. Our constituents all over the place don't like to be rushed.
Yeah.
And if we try steps that are definable, recognizable, that we can see that work, then we maybe can do something in addition to that. So why tip over the whole apple cart all at once? Anyway, so.
Scott.
I don't know if this is a concern, and I'm not saying we should assign different tax rates, but if that's not what this is for, what incentive does the parcel owner have to actually go through this exercise and make it as accurate as they can, and, you know, how problematic might that be, and is there a way to solve it? I don't know the answer.
Yeah. And Abby, I think that's come up before, just sort of noting that like the part about whose responsibility it is to assign this and how the owners of the properties are responsible for it is something that we probably need at least a paragraph on. Probably more than a paragraph.
Yes, and that I don't know if you want to go the route of certification the way homesteads are certified. That's an open question as well.
I think we could certainly start with that and then go from there. I don't know.
Do the categories show up? I don't think they show up on the bill, do they?
Homestead and non-homestead. Abby, do you want to answer that? I don't.
Yes, sorry. Yes, so you do see the rate depending on the classification, and you see
It's
whether
just-
it's homestead or non-homestead. So you could have
Yeah,
a
but
homestead that
subcat-
has rental use that has both tax rates applied.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you and interrupted myself at the same time and messed it up. I know there's homestead and non-homestead. Are there any breakout of the categories for the homestead currently on bills?
No, so you would see your property tax credit, but no. So there are no categories within that. The current categories are just on the grand list, and I don't look at the grand list that often, so I'd have to go check out a town that has it public. So a lot of towns have them online.
I'm just wondering whether we should have the categories on the tax bill so that people know how they're being categorized.
Well, that's what this bill would do for the non-homestead.
It would put it on the tax bill.
Yes, that's what section 2 would
So
require.
with a mixed one, there would be 3 or 4 lines.
Depending on how you determine mixed use should be categorized. That's right.
I'm just trying to figure out the hit to the people who are putting together the tax bills, how much work they're going to have to go through in order to implement this if we're actually putting the categories on the tax bill.
I think they'd have to use a small amount more of ink.
Excuse me?
I think they'd have to use a little bit more ink.
True. But the bills now don't show it, so there's some software work that has to get done to show the subcategories of.
Yeah, I've been through that before one time, and there is, I don't know who they are, but there's a software company that provides all this service to the clerks, and we probably definitely want to get them in. Yeah.
Sorsha, can you figure out who those people are?
I'm fairly certain you had Nemrick in yesterday.
Ah, great.
I believe they're the ones that towns
Is that who it
primarily use for grand lists.
Perfect. These conversations are starting to bleed together a little bit. Does 25% make sense for folks as a maximum place to start?
I mean, 4 seems like a lot,
Okay.
but consistency with other things is good.
I say yes, and then we ask them what they think.
Okay. Carol, you were.
Yeah, I'm stuck on thinking about how people will choose to develop based on what we do choose. So if someone had a general store and they wanted to renovate the general store and put housing above it, would they have put fewer units in? Would you want more housing because of any percentage that we choose? Those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about, and that's why I said I'm thinking about hypotheticals, and I don't know if I can.
They say,
Yeah, sorry.
once they hit 25%, they can put more units in. That's 25% is 25%.
So
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through how you're thinking about that?
So if you've got a general store,
Yeah,
and in the second story, you want to have affordable housing, are you thinking that they're going to only put one apartment in to stay out of the 25% rule?
maybe, I don't know.
Or once you hit 25, put 4 or 5 in there? And that's probably a lot, but put in 3.
Between 26 and 100% has the same impact.
Right, thank you.
We're gonna come towards the wrapping up of this conversation. So gonna try to highlight next steps. Hope everyone can help. So gonna start with 25% in the language, gonna put in language about sort of registration or certification that matches something like current law that we can then play with. Gonna have NIMRIC in to understand software a little bit. Gonna think more about how this might influence people's decision-making. Is there anything else outstanding from the conversation that I lost? Okay, Abby, do you have? I imagine you have lots of questions, but do you, what questions do you have right now?
So I'm hearing the square footage and that would be up to 4 categories. Did you want it at a specific point in time, or is it just any point in time during the taxable year that it's being?
It has to be some quantity of time.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the rental, right, it was like at least over 30 days. Like, it seems like there should be some.
Let's match up with the rental time
Something.
to start.
Rental is at any point during the year.
Oh.
Different things.
Let's say 30 days and work from there.
Okay.
Chris, do you have an opinion about the number of days?
I don't.
Darn it. I really wanted you to just throw out something random, we could go with it. Okay,
Sorry, I was thinking rental in terms of if you rent any portion of your homestead. Are you thinking of
Yes.
short-term rentals? Sorry.
just
they're
trying to
two
pick a
different-
number for us to put in the draft that we can then play with.
Okay, so 30 days.
30
from
is
now.
great, thank you.
So the other question that I have 2 other things to look at, which is utilities and dams in particular, how those would be treated or categorized, and then thinking about ways that this would flow through to the municipal grand list. Those would be-
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and the dam question was about dams that aren't actively producing electricity right now.
I'm sorry if this is getting, like, it's like, so if there's a, I mean, a building always has a use 365 days a year. It would seem weird to me if we said, if you use it for 30 days for one thing, it's automatically that, because if you only used it for 31 days, you're then using it for like 334 days for something else. So it seems like maybe we're saying if it has multiple uses, the use that is used for the most number of days is its categorization? Or
Why
that
don't we
we have some.
keep on thinking about that and talk to Abby about it, and then you two can come back to us with a solution. Okay. Let's go to the floor, and
Page's last day.
it's the Page's last day, so we have to hurry, thank you. And
You know what that means? No, we don't take it over there.
we are not coming, we're just gonna see everyone on Tuesday, thank you. And at noon for the tax workshop. For your